We are back with a Fifine microphone. By the way, buckle up as I have a few of these budget options that I'm going to be reviewing over the next few weeks. Get subscribed so you don't miss that. All thanks to Bark at Obscure Mics. Now, we have a new trading program that we're trying out, so maybe we'll see a bit more content on these models going forward. But if you want to check out Bark, I'll have his channel linked down below. Now, we seem to be entering into a new era of microphones, and it's a bit of a watershed moment in time where the budget end of the audio gear spectrum seems to have caught up with some of the rest of the world. And let me tell you, there used to be a massive divide. Only a few years back, the Amazon specials of this world were very much e-waste and e-waste only. The Mayonos and the Fifines were just crappy gear that couldn't keep up with the demands of any audio project and didn't offer much of a decent listening experience. Of course, we saw the winds of change over the past year or so with things like the Fifine K688 and the Mayono PD200X, but there was still just a bit missing there, especially in the quality control. This is the USB connection. It sounds like this. Where these new mics excel, though, isn't pricing. $60 for a dynamic mic that didn't sound horrible with both USB and XLR? This is becoming the new reality, and one that I think is going to have a significant impact on the audio world moving forward. But before we get into all that, and it is fascinating, let's talk about what this microphone is. The build on it is kind of what you expect what it would be. It is plastic, but also not super cheap vibes here. Zoom might want to actually take a lesson from this. Obviously, no plastic is best, but again, let's consider the price point here. The knobs, they're okay, though once again, they both have different resistances on them, which does feel like a bit on the cheap end. It comes with a stand, which I guess is customary with USB mics now, so it's hard to complain about something extra, but you're probably just going to throw it away. And the yoke system is the basic design, which does seem to be taking over for this genre of mics. Now, we're going to get back into that yoke system in a bit, though, when I put on my complaining hat. The back of the microphone, it's pretty standard. You have the XLR, which is decent, a USB, which is USB-C and no real movement on it, and you have a headphone jack. And how could I forget RGB lighting, baby, the actual superpower of this microphone. Now on top, you have a touch sensor for mute, which has been a bit touch and go. And that's another one that we're going to have to file for a bit later. And lastly, I don't know where Fifine gets their clown noses for their mics, but they feel fantastic. Oh. Now, I can't say how acoustically transparent they are or anything of a technical nature, but they feel so nice. As for the specs on this thing, let's be honest, you don't really care about that, do you? Let's just say this. It is a sensitive mic, and you shouldn't need much gain at all to get a usable signal out of it. Personally, I've got it at 42 dB on the Rodecaster Duo, and it's fantastic. As for the rest of the specs, well, they aren't online. So for the 50 or 60 bucks you spend on this, don't you worry your pretty little mind about them, okay? Now, if you are curious about that proximity effect, this is what you get. Again, the price just seems to dictate the futility of spewing out these tests and specs, though. For microphones like these, the only thing that matters is how it sounds. And again, like the PD200X and the K688, at least on XLR, it's quite decent. But where is all of this coming from? Why are we sitting here with a $50 mic that actually kind of sounds good? Well, you have to understand how these things are developed and built. You see, these are all manufactured through mass-produced parts. There's companies out there just spitting out dynamic capsules for the masses, and they can be purchased for pennies. And it seems since 2020, as there's been more of a push to saturate this super cheap market with gear like this, it seems the capsule suppliers have picked up their game, which is interesting because you know all those super crappy microphones I hate, like the Scarlett DM14V and the Tascam TM70? Well, those rely on the exact same supply chains to create their microphones. But in the past, they've just bumped their prices up and tried to sell them on brand recognition alone, which is one of the reasons I kind of dump on them a bit. Those higher prices are a bit insulting, especially when they're being built for pennies on the dollar like this thing. Just flat out, those mics are rip-offs and e-waste. But if that's true, what are these? Well, to a degree, they're the same. But remember, audio gear like this is graded on a curve. For example, I would recommend people buy a $99 SM58 before I recommend them to buy a $3,000 Neumann mic, because price to performance. However, even in the super cheap realm of gear, there are still standards that have to be met. Cheap isn't necessarily still good. However, the companies that are producing these mics like Fifine and Maono seem to have unlocked the equation between cheap and not bad. But before you clip that statement out as proof that these are better than the SM58, hold on a second. We do have to come back down to earth here. These are not your forever mics. They still exist in the realm of e-waste, meaning they're going to serve a purpose for you and be very useful in that time, but that's where their life ends. Kind of like a disposable lighter. And I don't have a crystal ball to see how long the life expectancy of these mics is going to be, but based on a few factors, I would say don't be surprised if that $50 or $60 microphone needs to be replaced before long. But again, going back to the disposable lighter metaphor, that doesn't mean this isn't going to be really useful in the time you do have it. But perhaps we aren't launching our music careers with it, though. Okay? And of course, I did promise some of my panted, grumpy comments and snide remarks, and this thing's doing better than you might think. A few thoughts, though, for Fifine here. First, that touch mute button has accidentally triggered a few times, and that kind of worries me, especially if you aren't monitoring through your headphones. I guess you can get used to it, but it could also ruin a podcast episode. So yeah, be mindful of that. But also, I don't really like how the yoke doesn't tighten up the mic to be stationary. It's a light microphone and it doesn't need much, but remember, you're attaching a cable to the back of it, which can make the mic go out of position while it's being used. The ability to tighten those nuts is somewhat necessary at times. And of course, yes, you can just add some rubber into the setup to give yourself that, but I'd prefer to see something like that come with the microphone standard. And lastly, in my cons, I would love to see Fifine start to dip into the companion app game. Even a bit of a limiter on this would be super handy, and I think a lot of people would benefit from something like that. This is where I think these affordable mics should be heading, in a fight for dominance at this price point. So then, with all of that said, am I actually going to recommend this microphone that I call the e-waste? Well, if you're a kid who needs to get their voice on the internet, or you just need a super cheap option, it's hard to say no to this. I mean, RGB, am I right? This is a decent sounding microphone with a decent look that would make most gamers and young podcasters quite happy. So yes, this thing is awesome for its price and its performance. Again though, if you have visions of a professional career in either content creation or music, don't expect this mic to get you, well, very far at all. Know that this is very much an entry-level option to get you started. That said, it's a pretty good entry-level option. What do you think, though? Also, again, I have a few more of these on the way, so stay tuned for that. And cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. I should shower.